start presenting the people more science, you start getting counter actions by people on all sides who try to bury it again, if you get the point, or misrepresent it. So I'm going to deal with certain principles of constitutional man to give foundation. You know, if you present a position, it is well when you see that misunderstandings and miscomprehensions take place, is to go back to certain fundamentals in order for people to have a foundation. So I want to present certain points that for you to contemplate and for you to build questions around. And to build those questions are necessary for your liberation. Now, in the nature of that liberation, people are often throwing the word freedom around. Not that freedom is wrong in the sense that people speak of it, but freedom represents more a pathway, as you understand. Liberation is the goal point. Are we clear? Meaning that you can be on a path to liberation, but don't confuse liberation and freedom as one. Now, to deceive people, you can present what you call freedom arguments in common conversation, and they're satisfied. However, not recognizing that work needs to be done, or effort needs to be put into a goal. The achievement of goal, which would be identified, which would not be vague, would be the point of termination or ascension, which is where the liberation is, if you get the point, i.e. the pinnacle, or the purpose. As an example, like say if we're doing some repairs in this building from a carpentry perspective, right? We can have a stack of lumber here, and we can have some saws, drills, and tools over here. However, if those tools are not applied to that wood on principles of skills, then the building wouldn't necessarily exist the way it should. Are we clear? And if misused or not used properly or absent of them, you may not complete the building, or the building may be called completed but has multiple flaws or it's unstable. Likewise, when we get into what people have been calling religion, here and there, many of you know that I've said over years that the masses don't get religion. And they haven't been given religion, they've been given dogma. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable because most of us have grown up in institutions that are called religious institutions and have evolved with concepts that we've been liberated into what is loosely referred to as spiritual knowledge. And yet, in the communities, that sort of like divine promise type condition does not exist and has not existed. And not unlike the conversation we were just having, when it comes to much of the youth that are coming into the operations of society today, while they reject a lot of the, to be modest about it, BS that the generations before them have promoted, because the fruit that was promised doesn't show up. All of the great gods and every other sentence, the devil's and God's game has failed them. Meanwhile, these God and devil games have been extremely economically costly, meaning that all of these beautiful buildings and all of these priests who've been, dressed in royal garb, who've been pulling down billions, not millions, billions year to year at the expense of the poor. And all of the poor, and particularly the youth who are observant, see foreign, alien Europeans who have been projecting and falsely claiming to be Americans, stealing their lands, stealing their property, stealing accounts that they later discover aren't their accounts because it has names on it that sounds like theirs, and broken families, and jail, and drugs, and broken families, and jail and drugs and broken families, and men running around in blue uniforms claiming to be lawmen who are really, in the fact, commercial mercenaries who've been murdering them at will, robbing them at will with no repercussions whatsoever, and the people who are claiming to be, qualification, religious, always divert the arguments away from what's really going on as if it's some kind of mystical thing that some mystical devil just did to them. Meanwhile, got the other hand out asking for finance, and then claiming salvation every 2 minutes that they never see. Now, of course, those who are under the line control and the guilt trip go along with the programming. The kind of good thing about this is that the youth aren't buying that anymore. And some people are kind of upset with them when they really should respect that and maybe give them some other wisdom that was held back from them, and that they start putting these children into these false paradigms, and then acting like the children are being insolent for questioning what is obvious BS, not potentially, not by interpretation, what's obviously BS. However, to say that and then not have substance to back it up is a different thing. Are we clear? So what I'm preferring to do today is the Constitution of Man, to give you some philosophical basis, not opinion, but still philosophical axioms and maxims of basis upon which religion is built, that I recognize dealing with people around the country, that many of the grand sheikhs, many of the adepts, many of the imams, many of the rabbis, many of the masons, many of those who are illuminated choose not to tell the masses that they gloriously always have following them while they happen to have their hands in their pockets all the time. And we don't have to say, but you already know redundantly, I will say every once in a while, which is a truth that makes some people uncomfortable and angry with me, is that these people keep selling these people gods who happen to always be broke. Not sometimes, they're always broke. And they're always collecting from the poor, and the poor are challenged to keep promoting these paradigms while their families fall apart. Gratefully to nature that the youth are starting to reject that whole platform. And while many of the adults are condemning them for doing so, they're not justified in that condemnation. But to the contrary, they should add to them the real wisdom and knowledge that they've been sitting on themselves but didn't have the courage to talk about. Are we clear? Meaning they didn't want to rock the boat type thing. And so I'm sharing with you today I was talking earlier that I wish the board was a little longer, a little bigger. However, we don't need it. I'm giving you some basics to look at. And I'm going to give you some references for your research so that accept not what I say to you, but examine it to prove it wrong. And if you're sincere to do that, you will learn in the process. Are we clear? Yeah. Meaning, don't accept what I'm saying. Look at what I'm saying. Look to challenge it. Look to do some research, honestly, for yourself, not for me. Don't prove nothing to me. And in doing so, I know that you will learn. Are we clear? It is just the principle of logistical questioning that has to be reinstituted among our people, because they have been trained not to do logistical analysis, all right? Which is a standard in erudition for humans. And I repeated this over the years, but I repeated this recently because I recognize a lack of consciousness in that area. And I didn't put it on here, but I prefer that you put it on your paper now. Education, fact. These are facts, maximum facts in society. Education is training for animals. quote unquote. Education is training for animals. Next statement. Erudition is learning systems for humans. Erudition. And also erudite. E-R-U, right? D-I-T-E. Erudite, erudition is learning systems presented for humans. Are we clear? Education is training systems for animals. It's not bad, it's limited. Are we clear? Now, fact. Yes, very clear, very clear. Now, point that I'm making to you, and it's not the pat on the shoulder type thing, so don't misunderstand me. Being an adept and being a sheik, anybody with titles fundamentally are made aware of what I'm saying to you right now. Are we clear? I don't care whether they claim Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Christianity, Gnosticism, Masonry, Illuminati, all of them are PhDs. Are we clear? All of them get certain fundamental knowledge to earn those degrees. Are we clear? Which means, like, say for instance, if you're Manchurian in China, right? And say we're fixing cars. There may be a choice of slight variance in alloy mixture that you might make the metal, but they're generally close in metallurgy the same. Are we clear? Yes. Like say in 60s, 70s and stuff like that, they built cars, most of the metal was like around 18 gauge. Now it's a little thinner. Are we clear? They may use different systems. They may use more plastics now. However, the fundamental chemistry of decomposition, whether built in China or here, stylings may be slightly different, but principles are the same. Are we clear? Yes. So if your car crashes and you take it to a Chinaman to fix your car, he's going to use generally the same principles. Are we clear? To repair it that someone would in Brazil. Are we clear? Likewise, I only give you that analysis to say this. When it comes to what the masses have been told is religion, that fundamental alchemy principle still applies, but not to the masses according to how they've been taught. Are we clear? They've been taught that there's versions and interpretations, and you can make it mean what you want to make it mean ebonically. You can make it be something else of interpretation. That whole interpretation paradigm is a creation of the priesthood and is fundamentally a lie. Period. Very rarely challenged. And most other imams, rabbis, sheiks, etc. will never challenge that in front of the people so that the other priests won't challenge their followers and liberate them too. When the priesthood all know these rules. Are we clear? As an example, like yourself, good brother. A perception, because you deal with law and jurisprudence. As an example, a perception of what the average person thinks law is and what law is not is both not what most of them think it is. Yet they operate in principles of law every day that they breathe and walk out the door. Are we clear? And we're talking about things that they deal with every day. But yet, most of those same people got a grand opinion on the creative forces of the universe and want to present to you an assured idea of what gods are not. When we talk to them on the iPhone, or whether it was Android or iPhone, whatever type thing, and we got direct commercial and personal relationships with the divine. You know, we good with that kind of stuff. And it goes unchallenged. Is that not true? However, in our communities, the things that we have claimed do not reflect.
Right.
The miseries do,
Right.
the failures do, but the truth of our claims have not manifested. Are we clear?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, for the most part, it's been the opposite. And then those who would look at that honestly are usually condemned or ostracized. Is that not true?
Yeah. You're right.
My point is to counter that dynamics by exposing certain things to you that I challenge you to research. And I'm not going to necessarily go in order here, but I'm going to hit certain points to give you something to contemplate, right? So, anyone on Earth planet, hear what I'm saying to you, anyone on Earth planet called Imam, Sheikh, Sheikesses, Grand Sheikh, Kyklos, Knights Templar, Knights of Columbus, Mason, Eastern Star, Shriner, Daughters of Isis, Daughter of American Revolution, Thule Society, etc. are all doctors of philosophy. Are we clear? Irregardless to the orders that they belong to, whether Islam in origin, Christian in origin, Judaism in origin, or any subcategory coming under any of them, and in the political operations of governmental structure across the world in the name of government, i.e. politicians, and the bishopric or priesthood at large. Are we clear? Are we clear? In your own time, challenge what I just said to you so that you can prove it to yourself, not accept what I say. In the public, they will have a bunch of different contradictory opinions about the holy books and about what you call spirituality, which is what the masses have been told are different sects, different versions, and different protesting orders of a fundamental truth, and the versions are justified type thing. In truth, amongst the priesthood, outside of the followership, there is no conflict. Meaning that if we're sitting here and all of you are structural engineers and a car had ran through this front last night, and we're sitting here and discussing the repairs and even the contracting to bid on this, we're not going to be too far off on any of us in relationship to what has to be done. There may be bidding wars as far as qualities, shortcuts, materials, costs, etc. But the fundamentals of the masonry, the structure, the surety of the foundation, the glass work, the tile work, the woodwork, what needs to be repaired, what's aesthetic, what's not, what's vital, what's not, there will be little to no conflict whatsoever, ever, except us competing with each other for the job. Which means the principles don't change, is the point that I'm making. Are we clear? Are we clear? Meaning that in general, customarily, like say if we are in some of your Asiatic countries today, right? In a sawmill, they may be using different dimensions of wood only because of the technology of the sawmills, not necessarily because of stepping off of certain standards that's generally around the world. Are we clear? So you go into Asiatic African countries, it is not uncommon for us to do more stylized formation of the wood forms that have more curvature in harmony with nature, as distinguished from straight lines. Or we may mix them, but at the same time, you'll have more curvature. Are we clear? Because of culture. However, the cutting principles, you're still dealing with saws and things like that, and planes. You're dealing with what you would call craftsmanship skills that may be more prevalent, where it takes more time, more art, are we clear? But fundamentally, the fundamental structures are going to be, in principle, the same. Are we not true? They're still going to use a plumb bob when they're finding corners and when they're finding points of reference. Am I clear? They're going to still use them 9-4 and 9-5 square measurements when they're squaring something out, right?
Right.
They're going to use levels and they're going to use mortar, bricks, maybe different stylized, but those principles don't change, do they? In truth, the same thing with religion, are we clear? Now, fact. Fundamentally, all across the planet Earth, past even to present, but hidden in different areas amongst different people, religion is fundamentally cosmology. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Yes.
And has nothing to do with belief systems whatsoever. Are we clear?
Right.
We're not saying that people who claim religion don't have belief systems. We do acknowledge that. Truth be told, that is a tool that the priesthoods created. Are we clear? But the masses have been told that the belief systems are the pinnacle of the knowledge, which is a false paradigm, and has limitedly been challenged. Are we clear? Now, I want to make myself very clear. It is not to condemn people who accept or deal with belief systems. It is simply to look at things for what they are we clear? And to make people who are less knowledgeable at least on parity with the priesthood who are teaching them. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Which has been resisted. Are we clear? So one of the keys to the priesthood power is keeping certain fundamental knowledge away from the believers in order to keep the caste system, the believers paying the bills. Called Roman tax, 10% tax, called also tithe, which was set up by Pope Sylvester II. That's where the tithing principle comes from. Are we clear? It didn't come from Prophet Muhammad, it didn't come from Jesus and God and Allah and Moses. It came from Pope Sylvester II. Are we clear? However, it has been inculcated into the systems called religion, where the masses have been tricked into believing that that principle of the tithing came from the God creator Allah in heaven on a throne with a turban. And that's not the origin. The origin is Pope Sylvester II, get over yourself. Do you understand? And it's been propagated onto the world, and it has become what people have been calling religion. Has nothing to do with religion whatsoever. It's dogma. The problem the masses have is they don't know the separation points. Are we clear? The other problem is that all the priesthood, Islamic, Judaism, Christianity, all know it, and they know it to get them degrees. They don't talk it because they're part of the general. Know the coinage. And then pretend that the misery and the poverty that humanity has suffered came from the mystical devil did it to them. It's the priesthood, always has been the priesthood from the door. Some more corrupt than the others, but all generally corrupt. Hard truth, but I'm telling you the truth. Handle it or reject it. Do the research, you'll see it for yourself, if you're willing to be honest. Are we clear? Now let's set certain facts before you for your examination to remove mystery. Are we clear? You know how like a lot of times you'll hear in social media people who deal with that. As Moorish consciousness has grown, you'll see a lot of countermeasures to try to suppress it or to try to dismiss it. Right? Now, I want to remind you all so that you'll understand this. You'll hear them often making reference to Kemet and Egypt, right? Right? And act like it's something separate from Moorish science. Are we clear? Right?
Yep.
Well, what they've been calling Egypt is Hikupta. All priests know that. How come that's not known among the people in general? I'm just presenting something to you. I'm not challenging you. I'm presenting certain fundamental truths that I know that the masses have not been told by the priesthood. Now, the question for you is, what is their motive for not telling you this? I'm not going to argue what their motive is. I'm just presenting that to you for your consideration. Since everybody keeps talking about they telling the truth, since everybody keeps talking about they're doing research and they went into ancient Egypt, lifted up 2 pyramids and found some stuff, and they had some ancient peanut butter sandwiches over here, and go, whoa, deep. We never knew that. Oh. One of the things you find out that ain't Egypt. It's not that we haven't called different areas Egypt. That's not what I'm saying. They cooked it. Why they don't want you to know that? This is where you get Ptah, when they keep talking about Ptah. That's where you get Ptah from. As a matter of fact, in the church, this is where they get Peter from, that they keep saying did the Christian thing. Why don't the priesthood just tell you these things? Why? Because if it starts you thinking, these different platforms that they've given to you in the name of religion will collapse yesterday. And you'll discover that these people are parasitic opportunists, seizing off the ignorance of the poor that they themselves have promoted and built upon and blamed on the prophets, and hiding behind Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad. Are we clear? And then not telling the truth that these representations of men, of Yeshua, Jesus, Muhammad, etc., were social reformers. They weren't pumping religion at people. They were social reformers. And most of their challenges came from people who claim to be religious. Are we clear? As a matter of fact, their murderers came from people who claim to be religious, who were threatened by them liberating the people. Are we clear? Now that's the truth, that's the record. However, it's not admitted to. Once in a while somebody will touch on it, but they don't get into that like that, do they? You see, the devil did it. You see the guy riding down the bike from the IRS, and they say the devil, no, that guy riding the bike ain't, this guy, agent that works for the IRS, who works for the Federal Reserve, who are members of the Knights Templars and the Knights of Columbus, who are working for the Roman Curia against the Sister Q Trust that was set up by the popes of Rome to control, conquer peoples and lands of the Roman Curia. That's who that is. What's so complex about that? See, because now you remove the God and devil game. Now they can't play you. Now you go take that guy that's riding your bike, punch him in the face, get him off your damn bike, take your bike back. No, you ain't supposed to do that. So you're supposed to pray on it or march around the place and, let us march, let us pray and say, what we need to do is make them recognize that we're somebody and that once was my bike. And I'm going to pray it out of his hands, type of stuff. And so they've been training our people to do this kind of paradigm for generations and calling it religion, when actually it's mind control for submission to a corrupt priesthood who've been pretending that they're not priesthood by calling themselves politician, policemen, and others. And they're all high priests, Masons. Now, Masonry is not negative. Understand. Misuse of it is the negative. Are we clear? Are we clear? A lot of times when people begin to do research and find things out, they start condemning the substance rather than the misuse of the substance. The information without examination of that information, i.e., let me make myself very clear so you don't get this twisted. Masonry is Islam. Are we clear? However, it's Islam science, not Islam beliefs. There's a distinction. I'm not getting into it now, but I'm making that point so that you can not get this stuff twisted. Are we clear? It's not defending or promoting any paradigm or one religion over the others as a competitive venue. It is simply exposing to you the truth of how things work on this planet, how they've been working, and what you do with it is on you, but you're not going to say that you weren't told. And you're not going to say that you weren't given reference points to challenge this information, because I'm going to give you reference points. Are we clear? Now, I would prefer that we do a little bit of interchange, because I know questions arise in your mind on certain statements that I make, because I have a habit of saying things that make some people uncomfortable. Not because I want people to be uncomfortable, because I want people to be liberated. Not to attack anyone, but to liberate people, although it's taken as the opposite sometimes. Are we clear?
Yes.
When you're seeking truth, or when you're dealing with erudition and facts, you don't stop talking about the facts just because it interferes with some belief that you yourself have accepted as being divine truth. If the facts say the sky is blue or close to it, well, you don't start making interpretations of how red it is. Do you understand what's saying to you? And if the dog is barking, keeping you up late, and you got to go to work in the morning, you don't start talking about whose cat that is. And it's a matter of interpretation because you didn't physically see the dog barking type stuff. Most likely not a cat. Get over it. Oh, is this a matter of interpretation? Did you see if the dog is? Well, no. What he said, ruff, ruff, ruff. You know, it could be possibly spiritually a cat. Don't get into that, because usually they're lying. And you can pretty much bank on it, although there is this small possibility it could be a duck. It's most likely a dog. Get over yourself. Once you understand certain fundamental rules, the same thing goes in religion. Are we clear? Now, let us interchange. You got the mic out there, right, Frank?
Right.
Now, how many of you have accepted in your life of your intellectual influence Islam or Christianity or Judaism or any of the subcategories or Confucianism or Buddhism and any of the subcategories? How many of you are commonly, put it this way, let's make this a little bit more fair. How many of you, raise your hand and look around the room, are in what is generally accepted as a religious order? Or who have been associated in the name of religious order? And it ain't nothing wrong with that. Right? Well, let's talk about what them imams know and knew, and what them rabbis know and knew, and what the bishopric in general know and knew, what them bishops know and knew, and other so-called religious philosophers know and knew. The question presents at this moment, how come the general masses who've been following these people have not been told these things? And this is the presentment. How many of you claim religion in any format but cannot give me a foundation on Hermes? Raise your hand. Now, if you claim to be religious in any format and can't give a foundational information on Hermes, you've already been cheated by whoever taught you. It's not a condemnation of you, it's condemnation of your teacher. Are we clear?
Yes.
So now you know where I'm going with this already. There's a lot of people gonna be pissed off. Don't worry, they're gonna be, because when we're doing this, they're looking at us in China, they're looking at us in Japan, they're looking at us in Honduras, not just here. So know that for sure. So I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying if I didn't know what I was talking about. But I also know a lot of people uncomfortable. And the reason why I'm uncomfortable is because I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are not religious. And I know that there's a Because the exposure of this information liberates people. And it creates problems for these people who've been passing the plate. Are we clear? And they don't like the Taji guy. I ain't mad about that. You know, but my position is sitting in that chair right there. When I recognize they have been cheated for generations, and we are some of them grown up a little bit. And our people keep talking about how they love their children, how they care about the esteem of their children. And we really need to liberate the children. We really need them, give them a better knowledge base and better books and stuff like that. And more fresh peanut butter sandwiches than they used to get. No, they're lying. They're lying, they've been lying, and I'm calling them on it. It's just what it is. Get over it. Now, how many are familiar with what is known as the 7 Hermetic principles that deal with the phenomena of life in the universe in general rule, as established maxims and axioms of law, indisputable among all the priesthood of planet Earth, and is a qualification for their degrees? How many of you knew that? I know you knew that. That's unfair. You're being so unfair. But the fact that you raised your hand, and the fact that not many other hands raised up, which is again why we're talking this. Because as this information is growing, you've got counter moves that are being made as we speak to try to throw. In other words, we're trying to dig you out of the grave. Some people don't know that we're trying to dig them out of the grave. They think we're interfering with their beliefs. And that's understandable, you know, because of the state of mind. You know, and they're trying to go, oh man, you're pulling the blanket off me. No, it's dirt. And then the priesthood is over here, who's in the established institutions. They got shovels dumping the dirt back into the grave, keeping you in the grave. This is the counter operations. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Yes.
Now, how do you know it's counter operations? Is it because I said so? That's not what you're supposed to be measuring. Are we clear? You measure it by maxims and principles. Are we clear? What should be taught to people in general to give them tools as a reference point, not that makes you know, but how do you know how to begin to know? Do you comprehend what I just said? Not that you know. What are some of the tools by which you presently lack certain informational knowledge? What are the tools that lead you to the portal or to the gateway to the knowledge involving the discipline at question? The logistical principle is what I'm talking about. Are we clear? Are we clear? This is what we seek to do in this conversation. Are we clear? To take you to the portals of information and the rules by which you measure not what I say, but what anyone says, and see if it matches the axioms or the maxims, and then you're safe to walk on that water. Are we clear? Don't trust what I say. Learn the rules by which I'm making my argument. Because 90% of the priesthood would publicly condemn what I'm saying right now, while in secret, that is the truth that liberated them, that gave them titles. Are we clear?
Yes.
And they will never, never, never admit it publicly. Because it represents the demise of both their institutions and their finances. I.e., the priesthood has enslaved humanity, not the devil. And to put it more correctly, the priesthood is the devil. You take that to your sandwiches too. This is pineapple ginger for those who are viewing. Yeah, that's true. Now, I won't get into the principles. I'll just say gender, vibration, compensation, reciprocity, etc. When you're getting into the fundamental principles. All religions on planet Earth are rooted in Hermetic law. How many people knew that? Raise your hand if you knew it, and don't raise your hand if you didn't know it. But do some research for yourself so that what I'm saying to you now makes sense to you later when you do research. All right? Don't accept what I'm saying, do a little bit of research. It's going to make you uncomfortable, but you can decide whether you want to be liberated yourself or not. However, as the countermeasure from the dark side of the priesthood will come up, it will come up, you will have reference point by which to measure them. Are we clear? And measure what I said tonight and what I've said in the past. And measure whether it harmonizes with the maxims universal, i.e. universal divine law, or not. Are we clear? And guide your life accordingly, if you choose to. Meaning that, see, Islam is not compulsory. But also Islam is not what people have been given either, necessarily. Not exactly. Not really. Uncomfortable truth, it is the truth. Are we clear? So, in order to liberate humanity or either put them on the path of freedom with the goal of liberation as this terminal point, minimally, particularly in the physical plane, these truths have to be exposed to the masses. Other than that, they're committed to more generations of servitude at the hands of these priesthood who've been pretending to be liberating them and never intended to liberate the people. As a matter of fact, they've been the ones peeing in the wells that they've been selling you. Y'all need a new well of fresh liberation of water so that we can bless you and stuff. They're the ones been peeing in your wells. Yes. And the people have believed in them, which is the source of their power. Are we clear? Now, those who have been silent are guilty by that silence. Are we clear? And I'm saying that now because I already know how the responses are going to be. They're pissed. They're mad at me already. They really don't get mad at me now. Not that they weren't mad at me anyway. But talking to different people around the country and having so many people talk to me inside and outside the country, I'm recognizing that even a lot of people with scholarship have a tendency to forget these rules. And so I'm recognizing that if certain fundamentals aren't given to the masses, you can't liberate them because they have to liberate themselves. Meaning that you can't save anyone. You can assist them. They themselves got to swim. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? However, you can assist them by making them cognate of certain abilities that already are with them that were given by their mother that they have learned through dogma to disrespect. Meaning that your mother gave you all the tools you need. The priesthood have removed your consciousness of them and then been selling some of them back to you as licensed privileges and belief systems. Are we clear? Meaning that you must learn again to be yourself. Sounds simple, kind of is, but it's only complex because you've been buried. It's sort of like, like if you've been in a cave type thing, right? So somebody come out of, somebody got night shades on and stuff, right? They come in the cave, you in there, you chilling and stuff like, and then they, boom, what was that? And poke you from the left, right? Oh, it's on now. You come out your gear and everything. And then you start swinging in the dark. This is pretty much what humanity is doing in life's events economic and political, swinging in the dark. They getting their keisters kicked. They don't know what's up, they just know it ain't right. And so they start arguing a whole bunch of things that sound good, like racism and prejudice and what color your skin is, because that's what everybody keep telling them your problem is. When the real deal is birthright theft. Now, as long as they can control that narrative, they can control the condition. Are we clear? If you can get them to take off them shades, come out into the sun, it'll take them a minute and it'll be painful for a minute. But they're going to see things in a whole different light. That's what this is about. Are we clear? So you must know the constitution of man in order to know self. You know how people keep on saying, man, know thyself. See, because in ancient Africa and stuff, the deal with men is to know the self. Well, that's deep. And then don't give you the rules. How about that? You know, what they really need to do is know Allah. And then don't tell you that Allah is woman. The concept is Allah is a man sitting on a throne with a turban on in Mecca. You know, just above the Kaaba and stuff. You know, Allah is collectively woman. And the nature of woman and her creative forces of bringing light to this planet. Period. And the nature of the moon governing that womb in process and gestation and rebirth and birth and rebirth and all the nature of the science around that, the cosmological science, that's Allah. No, it ain't. Yes, it is. However, you know, and I know that most people that claim to be Islamic would disagree with what I just said, but what I just said is absolutely truth and absolutely provable. That's the distinction between science and belief. That's the point that I'm making to you. Are we clear? Now, these people who got these degrees learn that science to get them degrees. That's my point also. How come they don't teach it? Because their institutions will collapse. Because now they got to justify the truth as if it's wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then all of the paradigms that they built will immediately collapse. Now, what's in their place? Now people are confused. They're mad at each other. They were already mad at each other. They're already schismatic. Now they're really getting schismatic, or what you call divided, because they have no reference point, right? If they did research in Hermetic law, all of that confusion and contradiction will be reconciled almost overnight. And also, almost overnight, half those institutions would collapse because they would no longer be funded by the poor. Why? Because they're no longer necessary. They weren't necessary in the first place, other than suppressing humanity and controlling them. You know how, like, when you create a false paradigm, it needs management. And people confuse the art and the skill of management with truth. It's not exactly that. You know, like you build a dam to block the river, you need to manage that dam. But you must never get confused that that dam ain't natural. When you start thinking that dam is natural and divine, now you're wrong. It doesn't mean it doesn't serve a purpose. It means do not confuse artificiality with divine reality and veracity. And at all times be capable of distinguishing the real from the artificial. Not rejecting artificial, but prospectively keeping artificiality in perspective. That same paradigm of misprojection is demonstrated in the bishopric operations of designating the United States Corporation Company in 1868 as person along with the human being in order to convert the estates, and goes very little unchallenged today, although some people look at it under commercial operations. However, not taking it serious that the priesthood has just robbed humanity and established it in legal process contrary to lawful. Back to you. Do you understand what I'm saying? My reference to you earlier. And recognize, having the capacity to recognize that on sight without super analysis. Let me contemplate this. No. 2 and 2 is 4, and we're not going to sit here and have 2-hour meeting on debating. Well, see, in Spanish, it could be interpreted, no, 2 and 2 is 4. Well, see, in China, according to the Buddhists, 2 and 2 is 4. Oh, now you got a devil and stuff. Because why? You saying 2 and 2 is 4 when it's a matter of interpretation. And they've been getting away with that. This is what I'm trying to present to you. And so I'm presenting to you, once you understand the fundamental rules, they can't play the game with you anymore. Are we clear? When you comprehend the fundamental rules as an example, when you're dealing with the phosphates and the salts, right, that which your mother uses in her womb to literally build this temple of the soul of man, temple for Solomon, not the temple of Solomon. The temple for Solomon is this physical body. Right, so it's not the temple of Solomon, the temple for soul of man to dwell on the physical plane, which is the Muslim or Muslim, which is the fetus, structured of muscles, tissues, electrical system, hair, bone, and follicle that is called Muslimin, which is Muslim, which is a fetus built by the womb of woman, having nothing to do with belief systems whatsoever. Game up. Do you see the point that I'm saying to you? That's the difference between science and fact, veracity, and beliefs. So you have people claiming what seems to be similar, but they clash. That's why they clash. Are we clear?
Yeah.
How do you stop the clashing or the schism? By telling the common people the truth of the origin of what they have, and they can do with it what they will to do with it. Are we clear? So when you're dealing with Hermetic law, so you're dealing with verses, talk, right? So when people talk about ancient Egypt, right? So that's the order. So what's been taught in ancient Egypt as thought is really Hermes. They're one and the same. So when people are talking about in ancient Egypt in Kemet, you understand what I'm saying? You gotta learn the Netuneter. See, because the Netuneter and stuff, that's the stuff. Well, Mother Nature is the cosmology of things, based in Hermetic law, that evolved into what you call thought. But it's essentially the same. That's first. That came second. How come the priests don't tell you all that? Since they want to talk about ancient Africa and see, because Kemet and stuff, and Ptah, and Ma'at, and other sandwiches in the lunchbox. See, so now you know that. So what I'm presenting to you is get grounded in Hermes, and you'll get grounded in all the rest of the stuff. All things will be reconciled when you look into different versions of Christianity, different versions of Buddhism, different versions of Islam, different versions of what has been called Judaism, and all the rest, and their real root connections, and go into Abraham and all this stuff. And you find it's a glandular system, the development of the humans. I repeat, the activation of the glandular systems in the human form that comprises what is generally referred to as the ascension to heaven, the anointing of my head with oil, the activation of the pineal gland, which makes the eye open, or the cyclops here, where you see without these eyes. But it is the nature of the being in reality. They ain't gonna tell you that, because it might liberate you from them. And you might notice that you weren't really weighted on this side, you just noticed his hand was in your pocket. You can take that out. Oh, no, leave the wallet and stuff. Fred. And with his holy robes, he can go off into the wilderness and get a job. I ain't supposed to say that, am I? Well, I said it. To get their degrees, they already know this. All right? So I'm telling you that because as you do research in this, this will liberate you in most of the other things that we're saying. And it will also, when you look at the principle between Yeshua ben Yosef, who they renamed Esau, Jesus, etc., and the completing of the cycle by Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, you'll understand the real nature of their missions, distinguished from what is presented to them by hadith or by these priests who modified their instructions that actually didn't teach dogmatic religion, but the liberation of humanity. In fact, you take them sandwiches to the bank and see if they cash them. Watch how quick they're willing to throw you out on your head. They ain't about liberating humanity. They're about sucking your essence and then discarding you, then blaming the mystical devil that is the priesthood's creation, and in fact doesn't exist in the concept that's presented to the masses, and never did. Hard truth, still the truth. Once you begin to comprehend that when references are made to the devil, just simply making reference to the lower character of man in the animalistic form before, and in the elemental form before he rises or develops culturally into a humane character of learning to love instead of hate, and learning the connection of all life. Are we clear? And learning the principles in nature that demonstrate that, so that you would do good because it is right to do, not because you're trying to prove a damn thing. Because it's your obligation as a being divine in your existence. And that's true too. And also to remove the priesthood who've been telling you other than that, while he interject themselves always with his hand in your pocket at the same time, introducing you to these financially broke gods who must submit to the IRS all the time, which means they're subordinate. Keep in mind, any god that broke is subordinate to the Jesuit order. Because we can't operate by $5. I got to submit this form, this 501c3 Skull and Bones agreement, so I can be tax exempt and shit. Yeah, interesting. You got God and all that stuff, don't you? You got an iPhone 13? I only got a 10, but he got iPhone 13. I got a personal relationship with him too. Well, you talked to him this morning, huh? You call the IRS agent and tell him stop this bullshit. Well, I can't do that, see, because then you're challenging God. All right, we'll talk about that later. But right now, I'm telling them suckers, it ain't happening. You go somewhere else, get your saltine crackers, and I might loan you some peanut butter, but don't go on my cabinet. You ain't supposed to think like that, are you?
No.
Because you're not being submissive, are you?
Right.
Yeah, right. Well, they know this. How come they don't teach it? Because they'll have to immediately take off them royal robes that you paid for with the widow's pennies and give their stuff back and get out and till the field like everybody else and help humanity to live. Oh, and stop peeing in the well at night. And in the morning talking about, we noticed that the devil peers in the well. So must we as raise finance to build a new well. Of course, his brother got the contracts. This stuff got to end. It really must end. Humanity must be liberated from the priesthood.
Right.
Now, the control negatively is the deconstitution of humanity. So again, the same way you're supposed to learn about the phosphates and the salts by which the physical body is built, you also recognize the moons or the cycles of the constellations that are ruling or that are consequentially in the heavens while woman is gestating in the womb, the Temple of Solomon that you call these physical bodies, or these Muslims that you call fetus. And then the moons or the constellations that are not ruling thereafter, usually 3 moons, you would look at the salts and the phosphates in those moons that the child or the Temple of Solomon is out of the womb or the tomb, and make sure that those particular foods are fed to that baby so that that baby can be complete. This is how you deal with true medical science and cure disease. That's true. Is that complex?
No.
No, it's not, is it? Well, it's like too simple of a science, isn't it, of studying nature? Well, that's Islam. The science, not the belief. The science. But do they want people cured? No. They want to build cities of hospitals because they're making people sick deliberately and then feeding off of their demise, as well as harvesting their organs. And they've been doing it for centuries. The priesthood have been doing that. So you see them doctors up there, they ain't curing no damn body. They're harvesters. And then when they do the birth certificates, they're actually bank bonds for selling organs, including babies and abortions and stuff like that. And they've been doing it for centuries. And then the carcasses of the babies, they sell them back to burger joints and mix them in the burger. And people think burger, hamburger, they think hamburger is ham. No, the masses actually think hamburger is ground up ham. And it's by choice beef. And neither one of those terms in food industry mean what they imply. 90% of all burgers that people buy in the supermarket and at the burger joints at the corners got human DNA, massive amounts of human DNA. They're eating their own babies. Thanks to your priesthood that you've been calling your, which they're really not, your government, who are high priests. They really don't like Taj Tarik now. That's why he's sick. And then they capitalize on that. That's what Roe versus Wade was. Legal, distinguished from lawful. Roe versus Wade. What was that predicated on? It was predicated on, and do the research, the Dred Scott case of 1857. where they declared people of Asiatic African descent non-human, so they could justify institutionalizing slavery and killing babies. Now that's the truth. So therefore, how do you present this? You say, well, see, what we need to do is show women that they have a right to their bodies. Meaning they have a right to sell their babies to the corporate state for burger meat. And for organs for the Jesuit order elite, who've been taking their blood and making adrenochrome with it. And I think they sell it for around $8,000, as of now, about $8,000 a quart, something like that. And that's why they torture the little children. And of course, the burger meat is nice and tender, and they can afford to give you 2 for $5, because they got plenty of it. Now, that's the truth. That's your bishopric. That's them guys. These are also called your clergy. Write that down. Clergy, C-L-E-R-G-Y. Now I repeat, C-L-E-R-G-Y. Clergy. That's who they are. Right there. Some of them are CEOs of corporations, so you think they ain't priests. You ever hear among yourselves and among different people talking about anybody in power in the world, and particularly in the Western Hemisphere, must be a Mason? What they're really saying to you must be a high priest. Because they are. This is why they themselves always promote philosophies that they themselves neither believe in nor personally support. It is for controlling you. Are we clear? Now what they have done and what they've been doing over the generations is the decomposition of the covenants of the human being to this divine self, and projected the real nature of the self, burning it out of the self. Pardon me. And so you must re-know you. And so some of the rules by which that art of science of I, self, law, am, master is done is the cosmological knowledge of the circular chart of the birth cycle and the gestation of the operations of the womb of woman and your relationship to your mother and a knowledge of your father and his position, and then you do a mathematical calculation of those energies placed together to mathematically look at the outcome and the map of the alchemy of the being produced by that chemistry interchange. That's Islam. And in doing so, you get a general, not absolute, a general map of that soul man's temple. Therefore, that is the rule how masterminds trace themselves.
Is that like DNA?
That is admitted today, that's ancient science, but they will tell you it's modern. This is why, like when you do, if they would be honest with people, and if they would do an honest DNA analysis on the people in general, they will find that, number one, all of us didn't come from this planet. Two, that their concept of what they think human is not exactly that, and that there's a lot of contradiction. And so rather than not to have to answer that, because they don't want you to know that humanity has been held back by the priesthood, they would adjust their argument to justify what they present today. And the deal of it is, even what is referenced as junk DNA are actually part of the self-suppression of humanity having been controlled by the priesthood, where your own mental has actually suppressed your own development by the psychology of looking for gods without or outside of self, and that becoming the culture, and in fact suppresses the activation of the thalamus, and thus the blindness or the calcification of the pineal gland. They have to convince you to do it. This is why it's important for them to control the narrative. Are we clear? Problem that the priesthood are having now, and this is deal with the cosmological nature of things. We're talking about divine operations, not based on belief, based on how things operate in nature. In the energy of Uranus and the Aquarian lights, the darkness of the Piscean belief age cannot live. So the institutions that are created or have been created in the Piscean era can't live in the light of the Aquarian energies. It's just that simple. Not based on what people believe or what they don't believe. They can believe what they want. It's irrelevant. Noah's nature will tear it down. Are we clear? One of the reasons for our conversation is to help you along the way so that you don't get blindsided by the maybe appearing to be cruel events that are taking place on the planet, and that will beset you and your families, that you're not prepared for because you don't understand the origin of it. Are we clear? So everything that you have looked at as stable will become unstable. It's not a bad thing, but it can appear to be a bad thing. Because we've been groomed into the false institutions that we thought were securely correct. Are we clear? When actually 90% of them are incorrect and corrupt. However, it is sort of like the game in town. This is what we know. This is what we've known. We've not known outside of Job. You know, like it's like say, and I don't want to dwell on this, but I want to make this point. And this is not new to you, but I just want to make this point. So look at this analytically, right? Oh, y'all got this, right? Yeah. So we're good with this, right? Mm-hmm. All right. Even that. When you look at that, so if you look at how the priesthood used Septuaginta, the Bible, Quran, the other holy books, to talk about Job, the challenge of what you think God is, what God is not, your condemnation of the God principle, your condemnation or the abandonment of the ancient principles of your mothers and fathers, in reward or in trade for Roman dogma systems, or you've abandoned the principles of your ancient mothers and fathers, or you sold out. This is what the story of Job symbolizes in the Bible as an example. But the people have been groomed into job, and that's the paradigm that we have been groomed in for generations. So when we measure our lives and build up and prepare ourselves for our experience in society, the first mentality is to get a Job, not knowing that we've already been played. That is not to condemn the work ethic, which is the nature of man in progress, but not comprehending that the job system, Job's system, was set up by the priesthood for your enslavement, not for your progress, not for your wealth building, which is why they interjected the tithing system in it called tax. Are we clear? which means before you feed your family, you feed Rome. And then they accuse you of volunteering to do this, and when you don't volunteer, they mandatorily come do shit to you. Did I say shit?
Yes, you
Oh, I was wondering if I heard that right.
Question. There you go, Mike.
Hold up, Al.
Like garnishing your accounts and stuff that you thought was yours that ain't yours, and a whole bunch of other stuff, a whole bunch of other misrepresentations or projections.
Are you talking about getting a regular job?
Say it again.
Are you talking about getting a regular job?
Regular job. Yeah. It's like it normal. That can be. Yeah. No dispute on that. Now let's look at it. Give him back in a minute.
Yeah.
All due respect.
So.
Come tell. I'm going to respond to this and then hold this going. Can you think in your mind honestly, any one of us that hold a regular job that ends up living a good life, other than struggle and kind of breathing in between from paycheck to paycheck? But yet you're told that you went to school to get a job.
Right, that's right.
Just a thought. I'm not arguing, I'm just looking at evidence. You know, the logistical analysis of this thing. That's not against work. Don't misunderstand where I'm coming from. I just want to point out this Job thing. Go ahead, good brother.
No, you hit right on what my question was in reference to the whole 12-step program, 12 years of school.
Stand the mic, because make sure that you're on there.
In reference to the 12-step program, it's several different 12 steps, but the main one is your 12 years of school that they prepare you for.
Because the 12 years, hold on, let's look at this. Hold on.
It's no school.
Excuse my spirit. Oh, this ain't too good. Yeah, I think that's still good enough right there. All right, close enough. Hold on. I ain't too good at this, so y'all excuse me. It's called Coptic Cross. Now, what do the priests know about this that they ain't telling the masses?
Each quadrant is divided by 3.
That's a tool. It's not a symbol of worship, it's a tool for measuring the horizon of the sun in relationship to Sirius and other major planetary structures in relationship to the rotations of the Earth and the spiraling behind the sun as the moon spirals around the Earth, the satellite, in a conical shape. And it goes through the ecliptic of the sun and comes into different constellations that have different energy fields that press upon the Earth that kind of create situations like alchemy, conditions, foodstuffs, lack thereof, and the calculations and the mathematical registry of that is called religion. And nothing else is religion. How come they won't tell the people that truth? Hold on. That circle in studying the ancient Canaanites, Moabites, is called church, which corruptly is called church, which means the great circle. What is the great circle? It is the acknowledgement of what is called the Milky Way type thing, that belt of stars that we see in this particular solar system, that contains all the constellations that are measured, and therefore it is called in alchemy, in building and architecture, and in general philosophies, the earth glyph. Also referred to as the mundane cross. When the science or comprehension of this function is applied, you will see in each one of these gates the 3, 3, 3. In this format is referred to as the master's seal. Therefore, if you become a sheik, a master mason, Illuminati, Knights Templar, Knights of Columbus, Kyklos, Ku Klux Klan, Grand Dragon, Ghoul, and any of the orders, you all know this. How it's used, that's another argument. Are we clear? But the truth is still one. Are we clear? They're all PhDs. They're all essentially, at different degrees, quote unquote, masters. Whether they're arrogant or whether they're humble, they're all masters. Are we clear? I'm just sharing with you what the masses generally don't know. Not that some of them don't already know this, they ain't talking. Are we clear? Because this kind of spoils all this game that's been going on against the interests of humanity in the name of religion. I didn't say in religion, I said in the name of religion. Are we clear? Hold on. Now, in that format, and then sometimes you can deal with the crossing of the constellations, etc., or the rising of Sirius and stuff like that, and you'll see the cross like this, you'll see it turn it like this. Are we clear? And you'll see the high priest, whether you see a ghoul, or sometimes you see them wearing this on the breastplate. If you deal with the threes in the four corners, you got 3 threes, right, in your four corners, right? Excuse me. What's that? What's that add up to?
7.
So you would deal with what? The 3 moon cycles in the 4 gates. That's in your north gate. Now in the culture, recall, we at different times, it's according to the millennia that passed, right? So generally you refer to Polaris, right? So you talk about the polar north. So we're dealing with North Pole, polar north. We navigate accordingly, right? And so your south gate, right? Your east gate and your west gate, right? And so this gives you your news. It's with a term of making humans erudite in the nature of things. That's where it has its origin. Are we clear? All priests know that. You ain't supposed to know that. That's why they all must be Masons, because they need to deal with the compass of navigating this thing at the pinnacle, because that's where you have the axis, right? And then you deal with these squares around here, and that's referred to as the carpenter's tool. Jesus had carpenter's tools. Jesus is the Son. The Son. There's a symbol of the sun, sometimes referred to the black dot theory. So this is the earth, that's the sun. So in your older Bibles and Korans and your holy books, when they used to do a lot of the glyphics or the graphics, they would always have this sign as the sun representing the God principle. All over the planet. How come they don't teach that? Because it would show the cosmological origin. Then they would have to explain it to you, wouldn't they? I.e., they would have to take you to church, to the great circle. People go to these buildings, but they ain't never been to church. They've been played. Are we clear? Now I'm telling you things so you can do research, prove me wrong, and you'll learn also in the process. But in the process, you will be liberated. Now, if you have the courage to go further, go further. Don't even stay where we're bringing. We're just spoiling the playing field for the priesthood, that's all. But your liberation ultimately must be your own. Are we clear? And if you're afraid of truth, this is not the place for you. However, it belongs to you, irregardless. Are we clear? Now, hold on. Back to your 12 gates, good brother. All right, so now you're dealing with what does that represent? This is what it represents. And so what it is what? Your 4 for the gates, because now you have what you call your periodical tables of metals and elements, and then you have subcategories that are often not taught to you, but that the priesthood know. So let's keep it basic to the 4 gates. So you have what? Earth, air, fire, water. That's what Yahweh represents. The 4 elements, not a being. Are we clear? So the masses' concept of what they think God is not a being, it really is a verb transitive expression, latent within all living things. Are we clear? All right, let's take a little further. So to learn your periodic table, right? Right?
Yes.
So we're dealing with earth, excuse my scribble, air, fire, water. So let's keep this simple, because we don't want to, I don't want to burn up the time so we can get into other subjects. So these are called elements, aren't they? Right? Right? Elements, il, the God principle. Principle, not being. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Here's where you get eel from also. Here's where you get elements from. The nature of things, the nature of existing of things. Hold on, let me finish. So with your elements, they will start you at a base, right? 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 And then they'll start you from what? 1, 2, 3, and 4. Notice how I said that. 5 and 6. And that's called elementary school. Right? And then you got training wheels off, and that's what they call you junior. 7, 8, 9. Oh, you getting it down now. Right? 10, 11, 12. And now you have risen in degrees, right? And for ritual, they give you a little kufi. They give you a little kufi crown with a little indenture that implies the thalamus terminating above the crown of the nose, which is pyramidal, which indicates or signifies, not fact, the activation of the pineal gland. So then what they'll do is give you your crystalline form of your pyramid, right? Right? With the eye of all law, Allah, all law, Allah, Allah, all law. At the pinnacle, right? And with its silver cord or the energy cycle that goes down through all of those juntas around the planet, and that will be that little tassel. That little tassel? Huh? Hold on. You pull that tassel up, it's a pyramid, right? Hold on. What they'll do is they'll cap this, right? Like that, and you'll see the stitches on an oblique. Then they'll put the umbilical cord, belly button stuff, right in the middle. See, because the square is still the circle. 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 360, right? Huh?
Yes.
So the 360 is still 360 here, full circle. Are we clear?
Right.
So we measure our chronologies, or what we call time, in cycles. What are those cycles? Sometimes called sidereal, which is the measurements calculated of the movements of the planets in this particular solar system that affect your life. That's religion. Using your compass and a square, this is why in society this is also called isonomy, which is the balance of justice, or Jesus, for all humanity in society. Therefore, Jesus carpenter's tools. He is justice, not necessarily a being. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Hold on. So now, you got the umbilical cord, then you got the ball of mud called Earth. Then you got the strands here, which symbolize, but are not unless you order them. Unless you order them, based on your knowledge degrees, you will get symbolically enumerated numbers of strands here that basically, when you order them, is 360. However, for the general masses, when they kind of sleep, they'll give you a number that's symbolic, but it ain't 360. All right? And so they say you graduate, then you take it off and throw it up in the ethers, in the air, when you graduate and shit. It's according to what you think, but it ain't exactly what you think. Are we clear? So they'll take you 3 years. They'll give you in kindergarten Garden, Germanic, Garden of Eden, the seed, plant the seed in the kinder, the children, and you grow up. Hold on. Now remember, when you go through all this cycle with this 12, right? So the 12 constellations, now you're ready for what? University. The universe, cosmology. It's not hidden, it's in your face, but they're not telling you. Are we clear? And what do they give you? A collage of information, thus college. You know, kaleidoscope. You know, when you go to dang, what are these colors? Oh, that's interesting. And that's where you got geometric forms with the prisms of light. But then the light also symbolizes knowledge, doesn't it? So therefore, the Son of God is the light. This is when they say Jesus is the light. That's what it means. It's really not a being, never was. It is actually the Son, your comprehension of it, how it functions, its relationship to you. Not believing, but mathematically dealing with the science. That's I, self, law, and master. You don't believe anything. You deal with the mathematics. Are we clear? Hold on. I'm going to give you a little more, then we'll go to some other things so I don't waste too much of your time. Because I'm going to answer a lot of questions that you didn't ask by telling you this. Even if it doesn't dawn on you at the moment, it'll dawn on you a little later. Right? So we got the cube. Right? So the cube is called Kaaba. Right? And so what is the operations of the gestation of the baby in the womb? We call it circumambulation. So they go around Kaaba 7 times, never clockwise, always counterclockwise to emulate the rotational paths and orbital planes of the 7 ruling planets in this particular solar system, thus circle 7. Which is the same thing, abstract. Now, if you are not aware of this, the concept is that these are different things. They're degrees of the same. Are we clear? So when your spooky is gone, now you're liberated from the priesthood. They can't, say our laws broke this week because we discovered that the roof was leaking. And what we need to do is raise some funds because when everybody was praying and doing their stuff, the devil kicked a hole in the roof and stuff. And so we got to raise some more finance and stuff for Allah and Jesus and Muhammad and stuff. And then you start crying and everybody goes, damn. Oh. And they start giving them their lunch money. Leave that parasite alone. And the sooner you get them parasites out of your family's life, the sooner divine order will rescue you from all your economic, social, and political miseries that the priesthood have put on humanity in the name of Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, and the rest. While they themselves know the science that they do not teach. Are we clear? Like I say, we could use more boards and I can go all the way over there, but I think I've given you enough to kind of give you the idea that will spark you to thinking a little bit on your own. Don't accept what I'm saying, do some research. It's uncomfortable, but believe me, you will have taken a bath. Some people call it baptism. But dang, I didn't know there was dirt there. I thought that was the birthmark and stuff. No, Keisha was dirty, man. It's what it is. Get over yourself. You know what I mean? Now, so all these symbolisms that are really in people's faces that they always see. So if you take this umbilical cord and pull this cap up, it turns into a pyramid. You understand? Now, so like baby, excuse me just a minute. Can't talk right now. So like baby, so you teach baby girl as she's growing up, right? The senses of nature of the being, right? So if we were cooking and we were making spaghetti as an example, would you sound like Mom's making spaghetti or something? Or if she's frying fish, you can sometimes sense without seeing it, you can say, oh, Mom's making fish. Or somebody open up peanut butter, you can smell, somebody open up the peanut butter, right? That's called senses, right? So we smell things, right? Then we touch things. When we eat sandwiches, we taste things, right? And then we hear things. And then we see things, because it's called 5 senses, right? But then when you get the emotions out of this and start recognizing how nature works, how she gives you your tools, then you activate insight. And then when you learn to trust the nature that the creative forces gave to you through your mother's womb, you have intuition. They call it psychic abilities. You put them, the 5 senses and those 2 together, now you got the 7 senses. Then those 7 senses, which are all forms of seeing, become what you have called this. In ancient Hikkupta, or Egypt, the all-seeing eye, or the eye of Horus, i.e. the sun. That means you've activated the pineal gland, the pituitary, and the medulla. Are we clear? Now, symbolically, and we continue in this, y'all, then we can get into other subjects. This is back to your 12-step ladder, 12-step ladder, Jacob's ladder. Yeah, right. Yakub's ladder. Yeah.
I love this guy.
Yeah, right. So they go, I like your braids, girl, and you got the barrettes and stuff, and when you do it like that, ooh, girl, I'm telling you, don't do like that. Get everybody sitting here, and then she got gold on too. Gold kitty cat, ooh, girl, watch it. Here she go. So she's evolving, right, and developing, right, so this is just an idea of this. So a smiley face, right? And nose in hair, barrettes and stuff. Right? Now when she would have activated this and the mother teaches her, right? Then she would be crowned with what is called the nimbus, or the sun, right? And so you would see this. Excuse my scribble again, because y'all can recognize this, but it would not be all the way down, it would be sort of like this. And it would be behind her like that, right? And then you see the gate here, and the gate here. And they dress that in gold, in a picture form. That would be a nimbus. So that the north gate would show, the east gate and the west gate, but the south gate wouldn't show because it would be hidden by the medulla, which is at the back of the crown, of the head, at the base of the head. And so this is what you see when you see the symbolisms of pictures in the ancient world, where they have Yeshua the sun with the crown of the nimbus over his head, and you'll notice that these gates are always dressed in one way or another in a crown of gold. Yet the science of what that is this, but the priests don't tell you that, do they? Why do they not tell? Because they're institutions of the church, which has been misrepresented severely, will collapse immediately. And if the people don't choke them and take all their stuff back, it's only because they haven't caught them as they're running down the street. Yet. And that's what they fear, and that's why they don't want this information out all clear. Nevertheless, the masses in the world has been put into darkness because of them. Are we clear? Now, in the Kabbalistic and in the Hermetic rule of law, as above, so below, it is demonstrated with that pyramid, and same thing with this compass and the square of the elements here, right? So you got the pyramid up, right? Which represents in what you call ancient Hikuta, the upper realm or the upper world, and the pyramid below, which symbolizes the underworld. You can also deal with the breath principle or the yoga techniques for breathing, which is called spirituality, and then the manifest of the Muslim, the form created in the womb of woman, which is a fetus Muslim, in the physical plane. And then the balance, the harmonic balance, which is now hex alpha. Are we clear? And so with the knowledge of this, you deal with the underworld and the upper world, and you see the compass and the square is also hex alpha. These are just fundamentals that I want to show you and share with you to show you how things are in your face, but they don't tell you. But if you start using your common sense, you will start liberating yourself. And once you start looking at the culture behind this, it ain't about spooky anything. It's about understanding the workings of nature. Now, if you insist on dealing with the anthropomorphic misconceptions that have been promoted, then you agree to be in servitude. Are we clear? And like I'm saying to you, even for the few minutes that we've been here, right? It doesn't take a lot of time to tell the truth, it just takes the effort. Now, what you do with that, that's, you can say that's on you in a sense, because it is in a sense, but at the same time, you get reference by which to verify this, all right? So once you get into Hermetic law, which are your universal, this is what I'm saying, principles of the phenomena that operate in the universe of all known, what you would call maxims and axioms, which means indisputable, established, unchallengeable, fundamental, at the root of all religious order. Then you can take all of the different versions and dust off the bull that they added to it and get right back to the basis of it all and start seeing it all has a common origin. And that the priesthood has actually contaminated the truth for their own selfish gain. And this deal of secularism and denomination is a tool of the priesthood, but not a fact in nature. They promote it as if it's a fact in nature of human misunderstanding when it isn't. It has been a control narrative of the priesthood. And they have not been charged. I charge them. And I say to you, liberate yourself, liberate your children, and don't let them demons in the name of God's mess their heads up. But not with anger, in a sense, but do some knowledge, some research, give them reference points so it becomes their knowing. Their knowing, meaning that they have a comprehension as to why certain things are accepted, why certain things are rejected, why things are done, why they're not done. Another example, as well, those of you who know, many of us, exercise the ritual of Ramadan. Now, in your cycles of your changes of seasons, for the good of the physical body, it is wise that you cleanse. Ramadan is just simply a knowledge of the ethereal nature of life, and through the cycles of the changing of the guard or the changing of the noble points of the seasons, you cleanse the body. So a ritual is given in order to promote discipline. However, if you don't do it, Allah's not going to kick your butt. You know, but people make you think that that's the way it is, and this shirk and sin. You know, we shouldn't do that anymore. We should tell the people the truth of how things work. It's just a ritual that's created to promote discipline, but not through guilt trip, through comprehension of the workings of the body. So just tell the truth. You know what I mean? And this is how a lot of rituals in any religion should be really told the truth of what their origins are, what their purposes are, and not to do them just to do them. They're trying to think that this makes me this or makes you that. The deal with it is when you come out your mother's womb, you weren't all these different things that they keep claiming you to be. You're a pure, unadulterated human being that already has embedded in your DNA the tools that you need to survive on this earth through your mother for generations and generations from all universal law or Allah. It ain't got nothing to do with belief system whatsoever. What you need to do is know about them, that's all. And this is just some of it to demonstrate the symbolism of the tools. Yes, I'm saying symbolism of the tools. And the tooling should be taught. That's where the wisdom comes. Are we clear? So that's enough with those sandwiches. Unless there's some other questions about that. But the deal of it is, and so with having a cognizance of the Constitution or the makeup, because Constitution means makeup. So when you're dealing with the salts and the phosphates, you're also dealing with the social order. So when you're dealing with the social order should be structured on a knowledge of, i.e., knowledge of the Great Circle, and its application in social being. Now, so if you have a fundamental knowledge of the workings of nature, you understand how to govern your affairs. Then you also have a comprehension of how government should be operating harmonic to those principles. And when it is outside of those principles, you have what is called color of law and color of operations. Are we clear?
Clear.
We do know that people who are not taught these things have been subject to color of law operations and color of authority operations, which has been the norm instituted by the priesthood and the bishopric of Rome, which is the basis of the political and the economic problems that exist on the earth planet to this day. Not some mystery devil, not some devil's shadow in the woodness, but in fact the priesthood collectively, i.e. the clergy themselves, are the source of the human problem conditions. And for the most part have not been charged. And on the other hand, have not been suspected to be the source of these problems. So when people are talking about, financial security and all this stuff, you see that the average person don't know the difference between credit, currency, and money. They think they're all the same. Who did that to them? The priesthood. Why does that false paradigm exist this day, even in the name of people so-called having great animal training called education, but lacking erudition, who think that currency is money and are still being played? Because as the world is waking up now, they're starting to talk about encrypting the currency principle. And it still ain't money. Until you really start talking about moon ecology and the nature of things on the earth, you ain't talking money. So we still have work to do, don't we? Therefore, the constitution of man must be comprehended. Because you yourselves have to start rejecting the priesthood in order to liberate yourself because as they see you waking up, they're starting to bury you again. So you notice how they're trying to build people's confidence up into cryptocurrency, because that's what they're moving into. Why? Because the Piscean energy paradigm is dying, that's why, not because they're moral, and not because all of a sudden they're ethical. They're setting up a new theft paradigm. In other words, it's easier for them to rob you with digital electronic form than it is even with the fiat that has a physical representation, although it is still private commercial paper that has no value. At least there's a physical representation of it. But see, they then ran out to the capacity to keep devaluating it because they can't, it's going to become obvious that people are going to need a wheelbarrow of these things to go shopping. And then it becomes obvious that they've been played. That's why they want to do the crypto. Oh, you're going to really be secure now? Really? No, not really. So the deal of it is, the requirement of us all, is to start going deeper into self and having a greater comprehension of the use of the brain that has been dormant. Because you're being charged now to overcome the workings of the dark priesthood, because they continue to work while you are waking. So while we're digging the grave out, they're dumping dirt back on. So there will be counter, and this is what we were talking about earlier, there will be counter, but the deal of it is, as long as people get caught in the emotions of the argument, rather than looking at the fundamental logistical operations, they can get caught in personalities, which you do not do. Don't get caught in personalities. Look at the maxims and the axioms. So write that down. Maxims and axioms. Rooted in Hermetic law. And you'll have the foundation of religion and truth, not dogma. Because remember, dogma is the corruption of religion, are we clear? Not to be confused with religion, although it's associated. It's sort of like the same trick that the bishopric and clergy did with convincing the masses that currency was money and that credit is money, is the same trick they've done with dogma being misrepresented as religion. And the same trick that they've used to convince the people that color of law is jurisprudence, when in fact it is not. It is only reference to give you a concept of the opposing of truth. And this way they can rob you, because when you accept that the private commercial paper is money and you confess it out your mouth, at that point they can say that you confessed to its value, therefore the liability behind the debt that it really is now accepted by you. This is again why it's important for people to really comprehend how things operate so that we can change our language and stop casting spells against ourselves and against the youth who are coming up. Because we groom them into servitude by promoting the language that supports or deludes to forced servitude and peonage, which we connotatively refer to as slavery. All right? So when your consciousness changes, your language should adjust accordingly. And so we must make sure that they get it at a very young age, because they're going to contaminate them at an early age. As a matter of fact, for those who you're familiar, this is why the illustrious Prophet Noble Ali says, get these principles into your children at all costs. Because if they contaminate them at that age, they have no more work to do. It is done. This is again, and this is redundant, why the fundamentals of the tools and distinguished from the symbolism of the tools is not taught, so that they can present or build upon an anthropomorphic concept that keeps them blind to the functions, hear what I'm saying? The functions of the tools. They have the tools, but don't know that they're tools. To them, they're religious symbols that they should worship, rather than knowing that they're tools to be operated in the workshop of the mind and applied according to the science of their construct. That gray area between the physical and the abstract of thought is called alchemy. And so the same principle of the chemical, or what you call the elemental admixtures and combinations, is still the math of the circle. It's still the math of the circle. This is what your compass and the square is. Go ahead, give your brother a mic.
Brother Taj, so just going back to what you said a little earlier about the circle and essentially the essence or the fundamentals of medicine, the medical science. So like myself, I was born December 30th. So if I'm looking at 9 months from conception to...
So you look at, you would more look at what would be called your sidereal calculation. All right, so now if you're looking at a calendar, you're looking at organized political structure. But that's not sidereal. I mean, that's not true to nature. That's a political construct. It's acknowledging the 12 moon cycles, but it's putting them in a convenient package, of 30 and 31 days, and then to deal with the oblique of the apogee and the epigee, you'll deal with what they call the 29 days of February, which represents the water bearer, but that's not sidereal. So when you're looking at sidereal, you look at the Eloah and the cycle. And so your first of the cycles, which you would look at, like say that you look at today according to the cycles, and that's what you want to look at. Then you look at the phosphates and the salts that are missing from the structure of your form that your mother didn't give you in her womb. So therefore, more than likely, you would look at weaknesses in the building of Solomon's temple. So now you would know the mortars and the blocks to use to reinforce it. And this would be where you would deal with certain foods and the absence of certain foods.
So I know Dr. Sabi was very big on...
That's what the principle is.
And so you just gave me the key to what he was doing.
But he could have just easily told you about the truth of the moon.
Right.
But when somebody looks at it, with all due respect, from an economic or business perspective, they don't tell you everything.
Right.
Because it's what it is. Because once you understand it, because the nature, in other words, he or no one else made them plants grow. They was already there for you. The knowledge of their usage is the culture that was destroyed by Rome, called the Index Librorum Prohibitorum Indexus Librorum Expurgatorius, the great Christian book burnings. So their source of power is the knowledge of the ancient Moorish culture that they kept from you. That's what Masonry is, preserving the knowledge for an elite, chosen, corrupted class, held back from the masses to keep them in the dark and ruling you with your own stuff. That's it.
What's that science you're talking about, the salt? What?
Salts and phosphates, that's knowing.
Okay.
All right, so basically, this is what you look at. Go ahead, get the mic, because I want them to hear your question.
Okay, years ago,
Get in the mic, because we don't hear you.
years ago, I used to study something in reference to salts and things that were missing from.
And phosphates, that's what it's about.
And then, in other words, if you lack these nutrients and stuff
Then
like
your
that-
body's weak, and you have a
Right.
tendency to certain sicknesses.
Right.
And it will make you subject. It is no different than understanding to look at the body as a biological machine,
What is that science called?
built with components. It's called the 12 salts of the earth. Just look up 12 salts of the earth and familiarize yourself with them. Why are there 12 salts? Because they correlate with the 12 constellations, the elements in this universe, the elements of the heavens. Now, when you look at, say, the operations of the womb, or what is called the Ankh, and they'll express it like this, right?
You was going to build it up before.
So you're dealing with the uterus, right? You're dealing with the fallopian tubes. They're usually dressed as in jewels and precious stones that they make in a symbol. It's going to what kind of finance they want to put into it. And this represents symbol of regeneration on the earth, but it's the gateway of the womb of woman. This is the uterus, this is the birth canal. What point you don't get this? It's not complex. So governing, and proper governing would be having a comprehension of this function. And what do you see that governs this? You'll see the quarters of the moon. That's why you see the symbols of the moon. And then they'll say, well, this relates to this in 13 cycles. And so they call it a monthly, which means the moon causes that uterus to cycle 13 times. Well, we only have 12 months of the year. Well, you don't understand nature. Are you talking about the sun's revolution around the earth's revolution around the sun, or the moon's revolution around the earth in relationship to the sun? So you're dealing with 12 and 13. This is where you get a moon calendar. So you need to have an operational comprehension of that to understand the calendars of the different cultures on the planet and how they actually function. Not the fact that they just exist, but it's easy to comprehend it if you just simply understand woman. This is why the priesthood don't have women in the priesthood, because they're suppressing that knowledge. They're suppressing culture for their own selfish reasons to conquer the earth. And who keeps delivering the children to the priests? The women.
20 minutes, Taj.
Say,
20 minutes.
yeah, all right. So the more and more you get into studying real culture, the more and more you will discover that the priesthood is the demon, And why they proudly, hear this, proudly stand behind a cubicle they call pool pits. Think they don't know they're vampires? See, but that removes some of the karmic debt, doesn't it? Because they tell you in your face, but in such a way that you don't suspect. Man, that guy in the cape, I thought he was doing it. Man, I don't know why he's going back in the chamber sipping. That ain't wine, that's blood. The blood of the sun. Damn, them saltine crackers symbolize the bodies. They've really been devouring humanity and telling us. We just thought it was good godliness stuff. No, this is vampires. For real. And the governing activities reflect it. So therefore the miseries put upon humanity economically and politically. They didn't come from no mystery devil, came directly from the clergy. Directly from the clergy. Super directly from the clergy. And they have not been charged. So it's up to you. You want to save your babies? It's up to you, you've been told. You can let these demons continue to rule the planet, or you can remove them. It's your choice. Kind of Rough choice, isn't it? Because these people believed in these persons. Anyway, that's who they are, like for real. And so, symbolically, the steeples or parapets that they put on the churches and the big buildings is a penis. Right? And then the aisles and the pews are the left and right fallopian tubes. And the aisle is the birth canal, and then some of them, they'll paint the doors red, which represent the blood. When the cycle comes and she releases the eggs into a structured form. It's all symbolic. And then they'll have like 12, they'll have a cinquefoil window that shines down with the movement, transit of the sun, and put a beam of light right down on the pulpit. Right? It's cosmology. It's just that they're using the dark side of science, that's all. Well, the truth still is one, isn't it? How do you keep the people in the dark? By not telling them the truth how this stuff works. Give your brother Mike.
And the court is the same way.
Because don't they hold in their hands the power of life and death, called sovereignty, and have been declared to the people that they have been delegated authority to rule over their lives? Now, where did they derive that authority? Self-appointed. Isn't that called unum sanctum? So it seems like the priesthood, the stuff's not hidden, is it? It's unum sanctum. They declared the bodies of men, including their estates and all inheritances. That is the foundation of all the politics operating on planet Earth. Why shouldn't you know about that? You're growing up. How are you, about 12 now?
14.
14? All right, in short order, you're going to be out there doing what you think is a job. Job. Busting your keisters, trying to take care of your family. Knowing already, because you're starting to smell it already as you're getting a little older, things aren't as much fun as they used to be, but you're still having a little bit of fun. But you get ready to catch it in royal spades, and you know it. And your greatest concern of your parents is you surviving this thing. Your greatest concern, particularly in your generation, is whether you get past 30 years old and thinking how you want to make it or not. And that's what you're being groomed with right now. Our job is to move that BS out of your way by telling you the truth so that you don't waste your energy in this false paradigm of preparing yourself in an education when you should be presented erudite learning systems. Write that down, erudite, E-R-U-D-I-T-E, learning systems for humans.
Challenge your teachers.
And you as a parent, being a parent, are going to move them in that direction. Although we don't have a lot of time right now to get into that. Start looking at it, take them to a dictionary, make them look up erudite, erudition, and look at education. Education is for animals and it's designed to make you docile and malleable for those who are ruling. But go ahead.
Yeah, I studied the Bible for a long time, and I started studying the Hebrew word.
Hebrew, yeah.
And I seen the conflict. They say of Noah, 3 sons.
Mm-hmm.
I found out that these 3 sons is not people, but our actions,
Exactly.
our mind pattern as like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva
Yes.
as the idea, the action, and change.
And activation of the pineal, the medulla, and the pituitary glands in particular, which happen to relate or connect you to nature herself. It's activation of the Christ degree, or the activation of Krishna, particularly the pineal gland, not a being whatsoever, but is the evolutionary development of the human temple, that physicality given to you by your mother, and that the priesthood had been hiding from you through anthropomorphic. Write that down, anthropomorphic. For this name for the children. Y'all, most of y'all already know this, but this is for the children. Now, this is where they've been teaching you, or like if you read, when you read the Bible, Torah, Tanakh, Septuaginta, the different books, and they don't tell you from the beginning that those books, for the most part, are taught in an anthropomorphic format. The fact that they don't tell you that is the first level of them preparing you to accept lies. Are we clear? Not that anthropomorphic is improper for children, but so like, say, mama, she got her little kitty cat on her blouse, her little shirt, right? And like when they're growing up, you might give them like the little Elmo toy. That would be called anthropomorphic, are we clear? What you discovered when you started studying is that the dogma systems that's given as religion were presented to humanity in the anthropomorphic formats without explaining to you that it was made for children. And they didn't graduate you. They left the adults in the children's degrees. Are we clear? Once you become aware of that, it kind of pisses you off a little bit, but you also recognize that by that ignorance, you actually started misguiding your own children. Meaning well, but actually were misguiding them. And then when you start trying to correct it, you find everybody gets uncomfortable because you're not giving them the pill. What must be considered is not whether or not you take the red pill or the blue pill into a false matrix. The issue is, why do you gotta take either one of them? You comprehend where I'm coming with that? The liberation of your mind to this whole paradigm of being controlled by the priesthood in the first place needs to be shed. It's kind of rough, I comprehend that. It's kind of like realizing that this thing is kind of hard for humanity. However, to liberate humanity, those considerations must be taken into strong star look, which is considered. With knowledge and not with emotionalism. And without the guilt trip that has been promoted in the name of religion for generations, that must be shed yesterday. If not, humanity has a lot more suffering to go through before the evolution takes place. However, let's say that it doesn't have to be that way. If we can help intervene, if they will listen and examine for themselves and become more of self, become more knowledgeable of the self, distinguished from what has been presented to you as yourself. And that is done through a mathematical knowledge of how your mother made you up. What she made, what phosphates, what salts, what constellations you come in on, you were conceived on, and start doing the deduction, right? Inductive and reductive reasoning. I.e. common sense. And it's sort of like, it'll take a minute for you to begin to be brave enough to start dumping the belief systems. But once you start doing that, nature herself starts reconnecting the wires. They're abstract, but nature herself starts healing you. That's sometimes referred to as the Akashic records. In other words, You got your own phone connection to the ethereal world. And nature herself starts teaching you. And that's not said, I'm not saying that to sound spooky, I'm saying that because it's how it actually works. The fact of the matter is the priesthood have actually tampered with humanity to the degree that they've disconnected us from nature. That's really what's wrong with us. To kind of keep it simple. And the problem that we have is getting people to think and to be brave enough to reconnect and not feel threatened by nature. And comprehending the workings of nature, which is truth of religion. And what they thought was religion really was mind control. And not putting people down for doing it, they were trained in it, but they didn't know they were trained in it. You know, so they thought it came from Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, and it actually came from a collection of wicked, evil, selfish, high priest, master astrologers with the will and the intent to rule the planet. That's what's wrong with the planet, that's wrong with humanity. That's where your economic problems are, all of them, not some of them, all of them. And the planet is not broke, and you're not broke.
Yep.
You were broken by the priesthood. All right? Any other questions? Any other questions? Now that's for y'all, it's for you, baby, too, girl. So y'all wanna look at anthropomorphic? All right? You came in kind of late, so tetragrammaton, go and look it up in older, remember your older dictionaries will be better for you. All right, your older dictionaries will be better for you. And I want to thank you all for coming out here to Everlasting Life. And I know some of you have gotten some of the good food up front.
Close down.
Also want to give Brother Ali props and credit and respect for maintaining this class, even very often at his own cost and sacrifice for you all to be liberated by many people who come down here to share information with you that, for the most part, is usually held back from you.
Hey, just want to thank everybody. Appreciate everybody for coming through. But we got to close up. And Ken is back there. Anybody that can donate anything, please help out, man. And we'll see y'all next time. It'll be like probably the beginning of July. That'll be our next class. But everybody, do we have everybody's emails and everybody's phone numbers so we can text everybody?
Thank you, Brother Tyler.
We need y'all information, man, so we can get in contact with y'all. Peace and love, everyone.